All right, everybody, hello. We are back for another live stream, and we are talking certifications in this stream here. We're going to be talking a little bbit more about the CompTIA A Plus Core 1 exam. That's right, the 220 1201 exam. We're going to go into a deep dive here. Check out our previous live stream. We talked about some of the things that you could face when it comes to just the A Plus certification. We talked a little bit about A Plus, the Core 1, as well as the Core 2. We broke down the domains, as well as talking a little bit about the exam format, and then also a little bit about the question styles that you might face. So if that is something that you're interested in, hop on over to the channel and check that out. If you happen to like it, I would encourage you, give a like, a share, a subscribe. Let me see if I can get all the shameless plugs in here. And definitely check that out. Comments are always welcome. If you are currently studying for a CompTIA certification, or really any certification, and if I can help you out, we can do some of the deep dives in here and really break down the exam and really just kind of the thought process behind a way to not only think of the exam, but how to approach the exam. And so for that, I want to go ahead and I want to talk a little bit about the 220 1201, that is the CompTIA A Plus Core 1 exam. And in this live stream, what I want to do is have really just a discussion. We're going to break down the objectives. We're going to talk a little bit about, what is it the objectives are asking of us. So you can, optimize your time, know where to, spend a lot of that time when it comes to studying, right? Because you're going to see different domains have different weights. The skills that are required, will have a little bit different of a approach, right? If it's flashcard material and it's memorization, I want you to be aware of that. So that, hey, maybe I don't have to set all this infrastructure up just to configure one component, right? Maybe it's just explaining it. So maybe you'll just see a question that says, hey, out of these concepts, try to, identify the one that should be used. All right, and we are in Florida during the summer here. So as always, I have the electric cloth here, so I apologize ahead of time. It is hot where I am at, so you'll see me doing that from time to time. All right, so let me tell you a little bit too about myself and where you can find me. I encourage you to reach out. It's one of the things that I like doing is helping students. I was a mentored learning instructor for a long time, but you can find me on LinkedIn. I am there under the name Wesley A. Bryan. You can also find me at Gmail if you want to send me an email. And you can check me out on X as well, formerly known as Twitter. That is Wes_Bryan1. But I also encourage you to really to join us for our Discord discussion. That's really, really important because we will be having a lot of different conversations here when it comes to Discord. So leave this information up a little bit longer. Check out that Discord link. Join our community. There are other members there as well too. It's free. You don't have to. You really don't have to. Pay anything for this. It's just a way to build up the community. You can also check me out as well. Check out my channel on YouTube that you're currently watching. And like I said, if you enjoy what you see here, please like, subscribe, share, comment, click the notification button as always so that you can be aware because I do some of these a la carte live streams here. And if you want to know when they're coming out, you can be aware of some of the scheduling that'll go on as these become a little bit more popular. And we get a little bit more traction. We'll be putting a little bit more scheduling behind it as well. So, all right. Looks like I've taken 2 minutes of your time already. Let me not be the only thing standing between you and success. Let's go ahead and dive in and let's talk about what we need to be aware of when it comes to our 220 1201 exam. Remember, that is the A Plus Core 1 exam, and if we look at the domains, the domain breakdown here, you're going to see that a couple of small domains are going to be the mobile device and the virtualization and cloud computing. These are very small domains. Mobile devices are around 13% of the overall 100% exam breakdown. Networking, you're going to see, is a lot more. Same thing with hardware and the troubleshooting side. They really do make up the bulk of the certification exam, so hardware is 25%. Here you'll see that virtualization and cloud computing drop down to about 11%, and we'll talk a little bit about the skills that are required, for you to be able to be successful. Increase that chance of success on the exam for the virtualization and cloud computing section as well too. So next up is the bulk, all right? This is the bulk of the information or requirements, I guess I should say, and that is the hardware and network troubleshooting. And we're going to look at that, and we'll dive into one of those, those objectives and really talk a little bit about what those mean. Now, when we talk about the breakdowns, right, what does that really entail for us, right? So I want to kind of approach the exam before we talk about the individual exam objectives, and we will through every single one of the domains. I want you to kind of wrap your mind around what is the level of skill set that's going to be required to identify some of this information on the exam. So let's go ahead and start there, right? So the skills required, right? We got one column, what is it that we need to do? And our second column here is how many objectives will require this thing that we need to do. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to preface this with the top the top category, I should say, is given a scenario. There are 18 different objectives that have the given a scenario. All right, so what does that really mean for us? Because given a scenario, what does it want us to do? That doesn't really tell us something, but that does mean that that's going to be a scenario-based question, and it's going to make up a lot of the exam are scenario-based questions. So with those scenario-based questions and all of the skills, if we look at that are measured, it kind of breaks down like this, right? We start with the troubleshooting. You will see it says troubleshoot, this component or this issue, right? That's going to make up 6 different objectives. But when we break those down even more, we can look at compare and contrast. Now let's talk about compare and contrast. What does it require you to do? Well, compare and contrast is exactly like it says. So for instance, one that I know right off the top of my head that requires us to compare and contrast are the protocols, TCP and UDP protocols and their port numbers inside of the TCP IP protocol stack, right? You have to be able to compare and contrast these. So given that level of skill, I want you to think about what do I need to be able to do in order to compare and contrast. It's really going to be things like memorization, right? You can even draw them out. You can draw the protocols and their acronyms, what they do, and then their ports, right? And you can, again, rote memorization helps on this one. And, these could be flashcard material too, right? No, so compare and contrast is 9 of the objectives on the A+ Core 1 220 exam. Let's go ahead and let's talk a little bit about some of the other what should we do? The action verbs, if you will. Some of you all might know it as Bloom's taxonomy. Sorry, I know it's important to instructional design, but that's where these come from. So I want you to think of install and configure. Now, when we say install and configure, think about that action, right? This is going to be could be a given a scenario, install and configure. This is where your performance-based questions are going to come in, right? So install and configure, there are 5 objectives that require you to install and configure some component. So I want you to think about that when you're tackling the objectives that we're going to mention for each of those breakdowns, right? So install and configure, that's going to be 5 objectives for that, that action. Next is deploy and configure. Here's another one where you might have multiple steps and performance-based questions, right? Because what are we doing when we deploy and configure, right? We actually have to do something here that requires putting a couple of components together. Again, it could be drag and drops, could be a scenario where it requires basic configuration. Then we have explain. So I want you to think about explain. When we talk about explain, what are we doing there? Well, that's kind of like a compare and contrast, right? We're not really comparing and contrasting, obviously, but it's still more definition-based, right? Definition-based is extremely important. Hey, Furious George, thank you so much for being part of the live stream, and most definitely welcome to send that out to your friend, and I encourage you all, if you have people that you need to support, that's what I'm here for, and that's what I'm hoping to build this channel around, supporting people that were career changers such as myself as well. All right, so explain, right? Think about what it takes you to explain what something is. If you can read it and you literally can explain it back, right, that's the level of depth that you really need to apply to this type of action, right? Explain does come up 6 different times, right? So I want you to be aware of that. How about summarize? Summarize, again, like explanation, like compare and contrast, is another one of these where it's really, if you think about it, it's definition based, right? Can give me even if you think about scenario, right? I got a scenario. Which of these out of this list can apply to that scenario? Essentially, you're doing kind of like the same thing, right? So if I give you a set of technologies, can you literally, in a one-sentence definition, can you summarize what it is that they're trying to ask you to accomplish, right? So summarization, right? Now, here's another one where it gets us back to install and configure, deploy and configure, right? Perform, right? Only one time, so not a lot of perform that we need to do there, but still, it's there. This is where, around that objective, that you see that verb there, I want you to understand that, hey, we're going to have to probably do some configuration, and I want you to think performance-based questions, right? All right, so that's perform. But then there are some standalone things that I want you to be aware of too. When we look at standalone tasks or verbs, I want you to know that there is an install, not install and configure, right? I just need to get this software installed. I just need to install a driver. And by the way, hint, hint, when it comes to help fixing, various hardware-related problems, a lot of times you'll see installing the driver. And I apologize ahead of time. We've got some commotion in the background. It is, unfortunately, unavoidable today. So that is a standalone implementation when we talk about those verbs, right? Now what we're talking about, essentially, is going to be doing something, right? Still standalone, but we still have to do something in the background or something that we need to perform. The next one is configure, right? When we look at configure, again, by itself, right? It doesn't say that you have to, for instance, I'll give you an for instance where 2 of those are combined, right? Install and configure. You've got an application, you need to support it, you need to install and configure the application. Versus you need to install antivirus software versus you've already got antivirus software installed, you just need to configure it. Maybe a signature, a definition update might come into play here as well. Then we move to one of the last ones, and this is monitoring. Now, monitoring is a tricky one. It only comes up once, but monitoring is a tricky one because you could be asked to kind of explain something, but again, this is going to probably be more performance-based, where they give you some kind of exhibit, they give you some kind of something that you need to view, and then you need to maybe put the appropriate countermeasures or something in place, right? I don't want to talk about individual questions or on the exam, but they're going to be it's going to be performance based on this one. All right, so that's a little bit about some of the skills required. Next up is going to be, let's talk a little bit about the level. How do these break down to the skill level? And we've kind of talked about that a little bit here. Don't forget to caffeinate, by the way. When we have the skill level, these are going to break down to a few different skill levels, and this really is the amount of, the depth I want you to think about on how you have to study something. So if we look at the very first category, this is understanding something, right? That's where your summarize, your explain, your compare and contrast come in, a lot of times just straight definitions, one-to-one definitions. Not always, but again, if you can take a scenario and you could summarize where, a certain type of hypervisor might need to be, right? That means you can, you're validating that you can do the summarization there. So those 3 there, notice they're, again, kind of compared back to, compare and contrast to the previous chart that I just mentioned, right? Then we have some that are the application, right? How do we apply the concepts that we've learned, right? And this is where our install, our configure, deploy and configure, installation, configure by itself, remember they can be standalone too, perform and monitor all come into play. And then in 6 instances, you're going to see troubleshooting, right? And that's where that comes under analyze, right? So you'll see pretty much that through the entire domain 5 at the end, the hardware and network troubleshooting. So this gives us a little bit about the skill levels and how I want you to approach this when it comes to, you know, the various levels. Now, in another live stream, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you how to tackle a practice exam based on some score reports that you might see. And I'm not going to use any vendor-specific implementation here. You know, I'll make up some of my own, and we'll go through them, and then we're going to talk about, you know, how we can apply some of this this information to a practice exam endeavor, and ultimately how I can support you. Where do we study the most? Well, I can help you out with that too. All right, so now let's go ahead. Let's go a little farther, right? Let's take what we've learned about the level of skill that we need, and let's apply that to the various domains, all right? And let's talk about the various concepts that you're going to have to know in each of these objectives, right? So the very first domain that we need to be aware of is the mobile domain, right? The mobile devices domain, excuse me. This is 13% of your overall domain. So again, we want to, optimize our study time and, really want to expedite how we can get this information under our belt so we can go in and pass that exam. So smaller amount of the overall weight on your 220, 1201, or Core 1 exam. Now, notice that the very first exam, sub-objective here, you're going to see is a given scenario. Given a scenario, if I could say that, not give a scenario, given a scenario and monitor. That's why I wanted to let you know that, hey, there's 18 of these given us scenarios, but what is it that the scenario really wants us to do? And that's why I want you to come back to that monitor. We're going to monitor mobile device hardware and use appropriate replacement techniques, all right? Next up is going to be the compare and contrast accessories. Now, when we look at compare and contrast accessories for mobile devices, there are connection methods such as USB, Lightning, NFC, near-field communication, Bluetooth, and a variety of accessories that we need to be aware of likewise in this objective. Then we move into 1.3, and when we look in, we move into 1.3, you can see, given a scenario, configure, standalone, configure, and provide support. Right, so again, keeping in mind what is needed to be done, when it comes to this objective, right? This is where we're going to look into our wireless, cellular, network communication types, whether it happens to be the 3rd, 4th, 5th generation techniques, Wi-Fi. We'll talk about SIMs. You need to know Bluetooth, location services, things like mobile device management and mobile device synchronization. All fall into this objective. Then we move into networking, the networking domain. Remember, this is a larger portion of your overall requirements when it comes to the domain weights. The very first one here is going to be compare and contrast. Hint, hint, hint. Remember what level that means. When it comes to the how you tackle it. This is flashcard information. Could be drag and drop. So they could be performance-based questions as well. Comparing and contrasting the TCP and UDP ports, protocols, and what their purposes are. Then in 2.2, we move over to wireless. We talk about wireless networking technologies, such as the frequencies that they operate on, a little bit about the channels, and various wireless networking standards, such as 802.11, the IEEE's body of wireless local area network implementations, or things like Bluetooth and RFID. All right. Next up, we have 2.3, right? That is summarize the services that are provided by network host. Summarize. Didn't say configure them. Keep that in mind. Didn't say configure them. That's going to be things like server roles, DNS, DHCP, print servers, mail servers, syslog, web servers, right? But it doesn't say configure them. Do you know what the roles are? Can you explain that back to me? Can you summarize it? Again, the level of depth. But there'll also be things like internet appliances, legacy and embedded systems, and even IoT falls under this objective. Then we move into 2.4. 2.4 is explaining common network configuration concepts. This is where you're going to tackle the bulk of network configuration. This will be specifically network configuration centered around domain name system, DNS, and DHCP. Then we'll move into comparing and contrast. Compare and contrast, right? Now, what level do we have to go into, right? Network hardware devices, right? Do you know the difference between a router and a switch, right? What's the difference between that and an access point, or maybe even a firewall? Being able to explain this is going to be important. All right, next up, moving on through networking. As you can see, there's a lot here. Networking is a big one, just like hardware and the hardware network troubleshooting domain. In 2.5, we are going to do oh, you know what? I think I might have missed one here. Let me back up. Again, live at 5. All right, so 2.4, I told you 2.5, but I didn't actually move my slides forward. So, recorded live from live television. So 2.5, this is where you're going to be comparing and contrasting those network devices. Then moving into 2.6, a little bit more configuration, because now we need to be able to configure basic IP addressing, right? I know what it says. It says wireless and wired SOHO networks. Keep in mind that that does include in the objectives IP addressing and the various TCP IP properties of your network adapter, specifically focused around things like IP addressing. Then we have in 2.7, this is compare and contrast. Compare and contrast. Do I know the difference between a satellite internet connection and a fiber internet connection? Can I compare and contrast that with something like cable and DSL versus cellular? And do I know the various network types, right? What's the difference between a local area network, or a LAN, and a wide area network, a WAN, and a metropolitan area network, a MAN, right? And all other kinds of ANs that you need to be aware of. Area networks, I should say. Here in this objective. And then it's almost like this is a never-ending domain here, right? Finally, this is explaining network tools and their purposes. Explain it, right? Can you explain it back to me? It doesn't mean on the exam they're going to say, hey, can you configure this Wi-Fi analyzer, which happens to be one of the tools, right? But you have to know what it is used for, and it might be something where they do give you happen to give you a diagram, and it says you need to know these tools, and you need to put these tools with what component you might need to be, helping to support. So it'll go a long way being able to explain these likewise too. All right, that moving on through here, right? That moves us into domain 3.0. That is the hardware domain. And when we look at the hardware domain, this is another one that's pretty beefy when it comes to the weight of the domain. 3.1 is going to be compare and contrast display components, right? So we're going to talk a lot about the attributes of the display components. When we look at 3.2, I swear I'll get that right. This is a variety of different cables, connectors, and features. Again, you'll see networking cables, whether it's fiber, if it's copper-based cables, and some of the attributes of each one of those types, peripheral cables, video cables, storage device cables, and a variety of different connector types. So a lot of information to be aware of on that one. So very good be able to identify those by being able to visualize what they look like too, not just explain them from text-based answers. Next, we have 3.3. This is where we dive into the random access memory, and we have to compare and contrast. Again, compare and contrast. What's the difference between DDR2, DDR3, DDR4? What is DDR, right? We have to know the difference between dual inline memory modules, or DIMMs, and SODIMMs, or SODIMMs, as they're sometimes called as well. Small outline dual inline memory modules, of course, to throw another acronym your way, as we don't have enough of those already. All right, then we move into 3.4, and this is where we turn our focus and attention to storage devices, traditional mechanical drives, as well as solid-state drives and their attributes, including their interfaces and form factors, as well as things like RAID array configurations. And that's important to keep in mind that we want to be able to compare and contrast this back to where you see these in the troubleshooting section come up, because they do have a specific troubleshooting section for troubleshooting storage and RAID configuration. So be able to map those back appropriately. That also helps. Then we have 3.5. And when we look at 3.5, this is given a scenario. Here's where we got the install and configure. And there are a variety of system components that you need to be able to install, really all centered around the backbone of the system unit, and that is the motherboard, right? So CPUs, again, we install on motherboards, add-in cards, we essentially add to PCIe or PCI adapter slots on the motherboards as well too. But it also includes things like firmware that you need to be aware of, legacy BIOS, and the more new and modern UEFI-based settings likewise too. And then we're going to turn our attention to power, right? We're going to have to be able to install the appropriate power supply. Again, think performance-based question on this one potentially. And you look at the input, the output voltages, what are the different connectors, and what is things like modular power supplies versus things like auto-switching power supplies as well too. And then we move into 3.7, and when we look at 3.7, this is where, in fact, the last two objectives under this domain are all really about printers and MFDs, or multi-functioning devices. And you can see, given a scenario here, deploy and configure multi-MFDs or printers and their associated settings, including things like knowing the different connection, device connectivity technologies, whether it happens to be USB, wireless, or Ethernet. What are some of the configuration settings like duplexing, page orientation, and tray settings. And then finally, in the hardware section, we move into the performing the appropriate printer maintenance. And this is where we have to do maintenance on laser, inkjet, thermal, and impact-based printers. All right, so that is a major objective here moving into 4.0. This one, wait for it, because compared to some of the ones that we've already tackled, this one's going to come and go really quick, right? And that's because there are only two objectives in this domain, and those objectives are really just explain and summarize, right? So the very first one is explaining virtualization concepts, right? Do you know the purpose of virtual machines? Do you know the difference? Can you explain the difference between a Type 1 and a Type 2 hypervisor? Have you ever heard of VDI or virtual desktop infrastructure? And what are some of the requirements surrounding virtualization concepts? Then we have our cloud computing concepts, and that summarization as well, right? Again, a lot of conversation. Remember, the understand is the skill level, right? Common cloud models, whether it happens to be deployment models or service models, such as deployment models being private, public, hybrid, and community, service models being infrastructure as a service, software as a service, platform as a service, and then a variety of the established and recognized industry cloud characteristics. All right, last but certainly not least, really the largest of all of the objective, or the domains, I should say, when it comes to this exam. It is going to carry the majority of the weight, if you remember, at about 28%. All right, so with the first one, that is going to be, when we talk about this one, this is going to be the hardware and network troubleshooting domain, and we've got a variety of different objectives that we need to be aware of. The very first one is going to center around troubleshooting on motherboards, RAM, CPU, and power issues. 5.2 is going to be really around your storage issues, right? Drive and RAID configuration, or RAID issues in general. When we look at 5.3, this is where we're going to turn our attention to troubleshooting display issues, right? Video, projectors as well. In 5.4, we're going to turn our attention to, it looks like I got that a little bit wrong here. So I'm going to go ahead and I will update this here. Let me back these up here. Looks like I've got these a little bit wrong. The summarized cloud concepts should not be there. So good, live troubleshooting right here. Let's see, given a scenario, make sure that I have these right. That should be 5.2 and 5.3. Swing and a miss. We'll try again. And you all can join me for this. This is the difference between the live stream and actually being able to cut this stuff out. But it's all about a conversation. All right, so there we go. 5.1. That tells me the next slide might be wrong too, but we'll get them right? So the first one is definitely the motherboard's RAM, CPU, and power. When we look at the second one, 5.2, this is troubleshooting drive and RAID issues. And then 3 is your video projector and display issues. And then when we look at 5.4, again, looks like this one is wrong all the way down. So 5.4, we will look at that one and then we'll move forward. Thank you for all of you bearing with me here on this. I should have checked these slides a little bit better prior to starting. So that's 5.4, and then we go into 5.5, and we are back to the shack, Jack. So remember, when it comes to 5.4, that is, given a scenario, troubleshoot common mobile device issues. Moving into 5.5, make sure we get this one right. Given a scenario, you're going to troubleshoot network issues. And when we look at network issues here, common symptoms that might happen, intermittent wireless connectivity, high latency, external interference, whether it happens to be RFI, radio frequency interference, or EFI, electromagnetic interference is going to be important. Then 5.6 is where we get into troubleshooting printer issues. All right, so we got back to it finally. I know there was a little mishap on my part towards the end, but like I said, I like to do this live, and everybody can join and hopefully talk as well. All right, so let me take a second here and let's look at the chat. Furious George, yes, definitely. So I got a couple of questions, and this is one of the great things why I like to do, the live stream here, because we got a couple of questions here. One says, let's see, what constitutes a mobile device in this exam? My understanding is previous exam, mobile devices were mostly laptops, and yes, and errata don't of mobile devices, OS more important. Okay, great question. I'm glad you asked it. All right, so we actually had a discussion in a company that I was helping to support on this one. So you will see, let me see here. I'm going to go back to, I'm going to jump back here all the way to our mobile device section because I do believe that is important. All right, so let's go ahead, and what I want to do is, especially with these first two, all right, so the question asks, on the focus, what is the focus for mobile devices? Because on the previous exams, laptop was mentioned. That is right. Okay, so up until the 1200 series, which is the 1201, 1202 series, these first couple of mobile devices, if you will, did say compare and contrast laptop hardware and use appropriate replacement techniques. The thing that they did here in the 1200 exam is they changed it to mobile device. And so what that means is not only laptops, all right, not only laptops, but it does still mean laptop hardware. It just does include mobile devices from that smartphone context, excuse me, and tablets, right? So they did make that change. It was a verbiage change, and I'm glad you asked that. Because like I said, we did have to talk about this in another endeavor I was a part of, right? So I'm going to go a little bit farther on this set of objectives here. We'll do a little bit deeper of a dive, right? So specifically, it says compare and contrast. Oops, sorry, wrong one. 1.1, given a scenario, monitor mobile device hardware and use appropriate replacement techniques, all right? So one of the questions that came, or one of the corrections, I should say, that I had to kind of let people know about this is that this does include laptops still as well, not just smartphones. Let me tell you why. Inside of this objective, I'm going to mention the concepts you need to know, all right? So use appropriate replacement techniques. Battery, keyboard and keys, RAM, HDDs, for those of you that don't know, hard disk drives, and SSDs, solid state drives, right? Wireless cards, and then some of the privacy components like biometrics, near field scanners. Another big one I want you to pay attention to, Wi-Fi antenna connector and placement, all right? If you are familiar with some of these components, if not, don't worry about it. That's why this is such a good question to address. If it is a smartphone, I don't really care about the Wi-Fi antenna connector and placement, right? That is something we really focus on traditional laptop support, right? Let's talk about the HDD and SDD, all right? Well, if you look at it, or SSDs, excuse me, right? Hard disk drives don't apply to smartphones or tablets. Solid state drives technically don't apply to smartphones or tablets. Now, you might say, well, solid state drives use NAND flash memory. Yes, they do. But they're embedded typically into those devices, and you don't replace those, right? So I will tell you that yes, they did change this to mobile device hardware and use appropriate replacement techniques, but laptops are still implied based on the components within that objective. I hope that helps out on that one. What a great question. Let me see what else. I might have missed some other ones here. Let me just look here. And again, I appreciate you all helping me, or bearing with me, I should say, when it comes to some of the typos I had towards the end. All right, so last section for printers should involve best methods to destroy one. Oh, absolutely, Furious George. Love the Office Space reference. Yes, we call it a printer maintenance kit, or also known as a Louisville Slugger, for sure. Let me just make sure that I didn't miss anything here in the chat room. So thank you, everybody, so much. I do want to encourage you, as always, hop on over the channel. Prior to us leaving, I do have one more slide that I want to go over with you, and that is the exam itself. When we look at the exam itself, what are you facing? All right. Well, with that A+ Core 1 220-1201 exam, your exam code is, well, 220-1201. Your questions are going to be 90 questions max. The length of the test is 90 minutes. That doesn't include the surveys that are at the beginning and the end that do not directly affect your test duration as far as what is scorable. And you will have a variety of different question types. You will have what's known as multiple choice single answer, which only require a single answer to get it correct. You will also have multiple choice and multiple answer, requiring you to answer more than one answer to get the answer correct. But then you will also have performance-based questions likewise too. When we look at the recommended experience, if you are changing careers, remember you might have to backfill a little additional information that might not be called out directly by the exam, because it is recommended to have 12 months of hands-on experience in an IT support specialist role, but it is not required. It's just recommended. So remember to do your due diligence. Remember also to do your studying. Apply some of the techniques that we've talked about here in this live stream as well to help you go a little bit farther. And if you've got concepts that you would like to see in upcoming live streams, or even some of the videos over at the WB channel there, or my training channel, I would encourage you to put a comment there, and we can definitely look into doing some of that content as well. And finally, I'd like to thank you for taking the time here and joining me in this live stream.